So, yeah, I'm badged this Marine Biological Association. You can see we've got a new logo, seahorse. I double checked to make sure it was completely different to the Seahorse Trust, and it seems to be. I've used as a front screen the picture of the Mediterranean feather duster worm, Sabella spallanzanii, just to illustrate the fact that there are new things to find all the time. Now, I've entitled this Marine Life Highlights and Lowlights along the South Devon coast in 2022. And the information that you gather and put very much on the Facebook page contributes enormously to our understanding of how marine life is changing. And our challenge for the SWME Ecosystems conference webinars this year is to actually make that into a state of the Southwest Seas. Someone's not muted. So the state of Southwest Seas, that's our objective, is to try and draw out what the things that we observe actually might mean for Southwest Seas. And all the time, I'm going to ask you the question, is this normal? In other words, something that we've seen during the year. Do you think it's normal? From your experience, do you think it's normal? Or do you think it's something unusual that ought to tell us something about how our seas might or might not be changing? So the feather duster worm, Sabella spallanzanii, was something which turned up in Britain actually in 2021, but I've been monitoring it in Plymouth Sound, on the Devon side, over the winter, well, over the summer, and now into the winter. We know of about 5 individuals. We can locate about 5 individuals at that site, but it's also been found in the Solent, and it's one that I want you to look out for. In the Solent, it was on settlement panels that John Bishop had out. So it was only just something just below low water level. So do look out for it. It's got a very large tube, very long tube, which usually has stuff growing on it. And it's very, very pretty. And it does seem to be a genuine range extension of a warm water species. So marine lights, highlights and lowlights, your chance to comment on what were the highlights. You know, do put something in the chat if you want us to pick it up. And then, of course, we'll have an open session at the end when you can open your microphone and so on. And, you know, obviously, we're going to pull together the State of Southwest Marine Ecosystems 2022 report as rapidly as we can in the early part of 2023. But, you know, some people do have to analyze their records, particularly the plankton people and so on. So it's not usually until June that you actually get the report. And then the question, where a change occurs, would you consider it normal? And I've actually put a definition in there. So thinking about the weather, and I accessed the Met Office website to try and get a little bit of a quotation about the weather. And this is today's quotation. Impossible, no, it's too early to guarantee that 2022 will be the UK's warmest year. But if the first 11 months have anything to go by, it's a distinct possibility of a record-breaking warm year. Mind you, we've got quite a few very cold days coming up, so that might change the whole story. But those records go back to 1884. And if the cold weather that we're expecting doesn't have an enormous influence on the average for the year, it will be the warmest year on record. What about seawater temperatures? They're very important from the point of view of what occurs on the shore and subtidally. There is a Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science program, which gets seawater temperature records from wherever it can. But I don't see anything useful like some nice graphs which show what the temperatures have been at different locations around Britain through the year. So I can't show you something. I hope that the people at the Plymouth Marine Laboratory who deal with the Western Channel Observatory will be able to put something together for the report, which shows how the temperature of the sea during this last summer has been possibly about a degree higher and not quite as low as previous years. So here are my records from my digital thermometer, which I take in on all the dives that I do. But that means that for the last sort of probably 7 weeks, I haven't been in the water because it's been so awful. I'm back in the water now. So in 2022, the minimum temperature in March was 10.4 degrees and the maximum 18.7. Now compare that with the row below. So in the period 2013 to 21, the minimum temperature was 8.9 degrees centigrade on the 4th of March 2021. So that's about 0.5 of a degree. Sorry, am I looking correctly? Yes. Oh, hang on. Minimum 8.9. So that's 1.5 degrees lower in the 2013 to 21 period compared with 2022. The maximum in 2022 was 18.7, and in the 2013-21, 17.6. Rough and ready, I reckon that in Plymouth Sound, the temperature, the warmest temperatures have been about a degree higher than in most other years, perhaps 1.5 degrees centigrade higher. Looking at the 3 dives which I've done in the last few days, actually, you know, the temperatures for this time of year are a little bit lower than in previous years. So let's just see what the, you know, the buoys, the monitoring buoys and so on turn up. Very important to understand in terms of temperature, most of the monitoring that's done is done from satellites, and they do see surface temperature. What I do is sublittoral seabed. So what I hope is that some people are actually recording temperatures on the seabed and not just at the surface, because the surface will warm up according to how much sunshine there is. So these are the sort of topics which I'll cover, what I call new kids on the block, non-native species, new arrivals, range extension species. There'll be some disappearances in the past, say 20 years. There'll be some range. Will there be any range reductions? We might be looking for those with northern species, cold water species. But you tell me if you've seen any range reductions, perhaps higher abundance, perhaps native species, perhaps range extensions, and perhaps non-native species. Lower abundance, native existing species, are there any which are present in less numbers than we're used to? And non-native species, are there any which really are down in numbers and might just have been a temporary blip in arrivals? Unusual species, expect the unexpected, and notable events. We always have notable events, but still the question is, are they normal? Is that normal? So new kids on the block, range extension species, only really one in South Devon, Discodoros rossi off mainland South Devon, at Stoke Point, just to the east of Plymouth. And that's a record by Lucy Martin on the 25th of September. But it had also been reported in 2015, and it was also recorded at Lundy in July 2022. So a very pretty little nudibranch. They're all very pretty. But the one on the right is absolutely outstanding in terms of prettiness, but we haven't seen it, as far as I know, in South Devon. And in a minute, I'm going to sneeze. So this is an Alan Murray photograph from the Isles of Scilly, but it's also been found intertidally near Penzance. So this is a new record for Britain. But that's what nudibranchs do. They turn up, disappear for many years, and come back again. They appear and they disappear. Don't read too much into a couple of new records of sea slug species. They've just got lucky with the distribution of larvae or the success of their food species or whatever. But do look out for this Babakina andoni, and let's see if we see it in future years. You can't possibly mistake it for anything else. But are there any old kids off the block? Well, disappearances. I think the one on the left, the black-faced blenny, Tripterigion delassi, is no longer being seen in Plymouth Sound and at Babbacombe. It was found long time ago at Portland. So we're talking about the 1970s. And then it was found in Plymouth Sound by Dave Peake in 2004. And for quite a while, you could find it at all sorts of places in Plymouth Sound, but not anymore. And the same at Babbacombe, according to Terry Griffiths. It's still present in very large numbers down at Porthcerris. So why has it disappeared? Has it been chased away by another new arrival, the ringneck blenny? Or what? If you've got any ideas, then let me know. And this one, I prepared this slideshow several days ago, 10 days, 2 weeks ago, I started preparing it. And this is a string jelly. It's very stingy. It's known as barbed wire jelly. If you are snorkeling, stay away from it. It really does hurt. So this is off Hilsea Point on the 31st of November 2007. But we haven't seen it off South Devon since then. It's been seen off West Cornwall and the Lizard in 2022. But note, and this is my words from about 10 days ago, note the 2007 date, time yet to see them off South Devon. And lo and behold, Bovisand Bay on the 1st of December, Basina Johnson, and she's seen them again on that part of Plymouth Sound in Crown Hill Bay, very, very close to Bovisand Bay. So they're back. And when they were first seen in 2007, they were a new record for Britain. We published a paper on them. It was in October, November that we were seeing them. And here we are in November, beginning of December, and we're seeing them again. So that's one which I was ready to say, it's disappeared, where's it gone? And it's come back. So it's just an occasional occurrence. Increased abundance of recent species. I mentioned the Mediterranean feather duster worm, Sabella spallanzanii. And this is an image from the 24th of September, 2022. Very pretty. Try and get some more pictures of it. I'm taking lots of pictures of it, but it is a notable species. And as I say, it's also known from the Solent. Look out for it. We'll see if it still stays around and see whether the numbers actually increase. But it is a warm water species, but it's probably the larvae have been swept across from Brittany on a jet stream current. Big question is, are they reproducing locally now? They're always, I understand, quite a distance apart. So they're solitary individuals that are found quite a distance apart if you go to somewhere like Spain. Paul Naylor does very good work, and he's been down at Firestone Bay a lot looking at Stevens goby, which was previously thought to be a deep water species. But not only is it found now in Firestone Bay, but you can see here that it's actually also got eggs. It's guarding eggs in a fissure in Firestone Bay. So that's a notable occurrence, which was known about, known its distribution, but here it is inshore and it's busy laying eggs. I'll say something about Sabella spallanzanii, because if you look at the National Biodiversity Network Atlas and look at Sabella spallanzanii distribution, you'll see lots and lots of spots on the map. I think that it's been recorded as feather duster worm. In other words, it's Sabella pavonina, the common feather duster worm. I think that there wasn't due diligence in entering those records, and somebody looked up feather duster worm. Oh yes, that's Sabella spallanzanii. Enter Sabella spallanzanii. But I believe that those records are incorrect. And if you get involved in validating records for the National Biodiversity Network, please, please, please be careful. Do it properly and make sure that you're absolutely certain that if it's something unusual, make sure you got photographs, make sure that you enter them, for instance, to iNaturalist, where they'll be referred to someone who's an expert in that group. So there are problems with the NBN Atlas. There are spurious records in it. That's something for you to bear in mind. Increased abundance. This apparently has happened with this lovely little anemone shrimp at Babbacombe. This is information from Terry Griffiths. This is my photograph recorded in Britain in 2007 and at Babbacombe in 2008. So first recorded at Swanage Pier and then at Babbacombe. I don't know of any other records. It's the sort of thing you can easily see snorkeling. And obviously, if you've got areas with snake locks and anemones in, you know, it's well worthwhile having a little pick through the tentacles when they're exposed by the low tide and seeing whether we can, you know, add to the number of places where this anemone shrimp is found. So look out for the anemone shrimp. This one's quite an easy one because this is, of course, St. Piran's crab, Clibanaris erythropus, the comeback kid, because this is the one which was recorded in North Cornwall and also at Wembury until the mid-1980s. And then Alan and Eve Southwood, who had certain rock pools which they go to check on it, couldn't find it anymore. And it was only about 5 years ago that it was found near Falmouth and it had reappeared. It might well have been there all the time, but in places where people didn't find it, or it might have recruited from across the channel on some jet stream current, which is what happens. It's very distinctive. You can see it's got these blue spots on it and stripes, and it's quite a pretty little hermit crab. Usually you find them in just one particular rock pool on a shore. You know, you've got to get lucky, and you'll find a lot of them in that rock pool or on the rocks surrounding that particular rock pool, wherever it is. Now, the furthest east that we know that it occurs is at Prawle Point. Steve Hawkins found it there when he was doing some marklim surveys. So lots of places in Cornwall. I photographed this at Wembury. It occurs in other locations along the south coast between Cornwall and Prawle Point. That's your challenge. Your challenge is to find it at Corbin Head at the weekend. You have got to turn a lot of hermit crabs over to finally find them. David Fenwick finds a terrific amount of stuff, as you know, and I just thought I'd list a few of them here without actually showing pictures. So an unusual green photosynthesizing flatworm, you know, recorded quite widely, but a rather unusual species. He's continuing to find the Pacific death worm. Now at Bobbysand Beach, this was a new record for Britain just a few years ago, and two specimens of the non-native amphipod Quadrumera. Bobbysand Beach again. The only other place it's been reported is at Long Rock and Penzance. So David Fenwick does great stuff. He must have a very sharp eye and he's very systematic at picking through things. And this is one of his finds, a Nemertian Tenuilineus albocinctus, a species new to the UK, initially from Penzance and later in a second more mature and typical specimen found near the low tide mark on an extra low tide at Marrow Pool in Mountbatten, Plymouth. So here we are, South Devon. I don't know how easily you'll find to identify this beast, but you know, David's very systematic about his identifications, and they're bound to be correct. Marrow Pool at Mountbatten is a very interesting shore, not least because it still has patches of seagrass, Zostra marina, and it was recorded as having patches in 1903. So do look out the literature, and you know, when you find something unusual, have a look at Plymouth marine fauna. It doesn't necessarily extend as far as the parts of the coast that you normally go to, but you can see whether something has been recorded before. Yes, it's the Plymouth marine fauna. I'm talking about a plant, but it was actually a description of a polychaete worm, which was found, and it was described as occurring in the sandy patches between Zostra marina. So we know that seagrass Zostra marina was present in Marrow Pool in 1903. Higher abundance. I don't know whether you find these sorts of things. We see them diving. And of course, it's this thing that I'm interested in. Not the rock cook, but fish lice. Are we seeing more? The impression from divers and people like Paul Naylor is that we are seeing a lot more fish lice on the wrasse in particular. So do look out for these. I'm not sure how much harm they do the wrasse. I've never seen a wrasse covered in fish lice, and I'm afraid taking photographs of wrasse is something you've got to be very quick. People have got better pictures than mine here. So fish life, are we seeing more? Anyone seen any of these in 2022? Now, look out for them being washed up on the shore, because that's what normally happens at this time of year, is that they come in on oceanic currents from the east coast of the United States and perhaps up from places like the Azores. They get swept into British waters in the springtime, and they are here on their holidays, but they can't find their way home. So when the temperature falls below about 12 degrees, they go comatose, and they either die or they get washed out of the crevices that they've gone to sleep in, and they got washed up on the strand line, and you find them, you know, washed up and dead. I haven't got any records of them observed by divers or snorkelers this year. Last year, I'm afraid that the spear fishermen go after them. And last year I got records from a spear fisherman. So perhaps I ought to get in contact with that spear fisherman again and saying, have you seen any grey triggerfish at all? So, you know, if you find any stranded on the strand line, well worth posting on your Facebook page, wherever you find them. You might even go on an excursion to North Cornwall, which seems the most frequent area where they turn up. The other question is, do they overwinter? And I've been told that there's someone who thinks that they overwinter in Foy Harbour. Well, I'd like to know a bit more about that, but we never see babies. They don't breed in this country, but they have been here, first recorded at the beginning of the 19th century. So it's not something new. It's not something to do with global warming. It's a species which is picked up by oceanic currents and brought to this coastline. Notable events. Well, we quite often have blooms of jellyfish. At the end of April, we were seeing very small compass jellyfish, 15mm bell diameter, but not in large numbers. And there were more very small ones, but this time they'd grown to 15 to 20mm across the bell, being seen early May, through to small, that's 40 to 50mm across the bell, just really a couple of inches in late May. Through the summer, they got larger and larger. But otherwise, very few Scyphozoan jellyfish about in 2022. Unless you're going to tell me differently, you know, no enormous strandings of barrel jellyfish, I think one or two, no enormous strandings of mauve jellyfish. It seems to have been a very poor year for Scyphozoan jellyfish. But quite a few siphonophores, salps have been found this year. So this is a string jelly, likely Nanomia cara at Western Ebb Rocks at the entrance to the Elm on the 4th of June. So it's a phylus-linked siphonophore. It forms these strings, which usually in our waters are just a metre or so long, but they can be 30 metres long if you go to the Mediterranean. And this salp was picked up from the plankton hauls which Plymouth Marine Laboratory do. So this is Amanda Beasley's picture of a salp. We got a lot of salps from the Isles of Scilly a few years ago, but not this year. And this is a much better picture of that Nanomia cara, but it is at Porthcerris. So Aaron Saunders, very nice illustration of it. You know, when I lived in Ilfracombe, and the museum would take all sorts of stuff that, was novel, which came up, and about every 11 years, they'd have on display a Portuguese man of war in an aquarium. But that was about the frequency with which Portuguese man of war were being washed ashore. Now, this is one at Slapton Sands on the 13th of February. It's actually photographed by David Bailey of the Dartmouth Coast Guard Rescue Team. And Nigel Mortimer reports tiny ones from bee sounds on the 12th of March. So Torcross and so 13th of February, 3rd of March, 12th of March, that little window of time when these Physalia, obviously don't pick them up unless you pick them up by the bell, because you get stung something horrible. It seems that they're becoming more frequent in terms of strandings, but not a lot. Perhaps you've seen them. Let us know. Cuttlefish seem to be coming in earlier. They seem to be changing their behavior, and this apparently is the Cuttlefish Conservation Consortium. So that group exists, the Cuttlefish Conservation Consortium. They seem to have a Facebook presence, but not yet a website, although I didn't check that before updating this slideshow. So cuttlefish perhaps coming in early, 3rd of April, more on the 11th of April. Usually it's the end of April that they turn up at Babbacombe. And then peculiarly this autumn, before the weather closed in and everything got horrible, we were seeing just lots and lots of these baby cuttlefish, this year's babies, all gathered together in shore areas in Plymouth Sound. I think also in Babbacombe. I'm not sure about, for instance, Breakwater Beach. But if you've got intelligence, if you know people who go diving and they say, oh yeah, we've seen that sort of thing, first time we've ever seen it, then do let me know. I'll pass the information on, because it does seem as if the behavior is changing a bit. I've got a date of 22nd of January on this, but I'm not sure it wasn't, sorry, 22nd of January 2022. I'm not sure it wasn't 2021, but this is the common octopus. Well, it's common in the Mediterranean, but not off our shores, Octopus vulgaris. Now, early in the spring, well, I think May, June time, fishermen in Cornwall were getting a lot of them in their lobster pots. They were getting a plague of them because, of course, if they go in their lobster pots, they eat the lobsters. And then it just died away. There were still some of them in Falmouth Harbour, and I think there was one seen at Babbacombe. But it seems as if there was a sort of influx of octopus early in the summer, which then dissipated. But yes, they were present in South Devon, but not in the numbers that they were being recorded about 3 years ago. So look out for this sort of thing when you do your shore surveys. As I say, this was the 22nd of January 2022. Obviously, this one is demised. They don't live for very long. They breed, they die. And here you are, Mike. Here's your notable event and observation. Amphibalanus improvisors, a non-native species, but characteristic of low salinity conditions, head of the Tean Estuary. But we did a survey in 1988 for the Nature Conservancy Council. We didn't get it. Perhaps that was just our inability to recognize barnacles properly. And it's not in the Linnaean Society synopsis. So, you know, Alan Southwood's Linnaean Society synopses for the barnacles, he lists places where he's found it, but he doesn't list the Tean Estuary. So something for Mike to highlight when he gives his talk on the Tean Estuary, as I'm sure you intend to do, Mike. But that's an interesting record, and especially since you know, it doesn't seem to have been recorded there before, but you are welcome to correct me. This is what we expect at this time of year after storms, is driftwood, lost buoys, including from a course in Newfoundland, with lots and lots of gooseneck barnacles on. So this is Bovisand Beach on the 25th of November, Lipas Hilii, and what you're looking for when you find this on the seashore is you're looking for Columbus crabs. So here are two Columbus crabs in amongst the stalked barnacles, and they come over from basically the Caribbean, warm parts, perhaps off Florida, of Central America. And they're called Columbus crabs because apparently Christopher Columbus described them in his logbook. So presumably they pulled out some stalked barnacles, or perhaps even had them settled on their hull, and when they were cleaning it, they found these Columbus crabs. So those pictures are from the Isles of Scilly. Sorry, the actual picture of the Columbus crabs are from the Isles of Scilly. And look out for them. We were looking really hard on that pallet, but didn't find any. And is this normal? You all know the story of the spiny lobsters. The spiny lobsters were basically exterminated in parts of the southwest, including South Devon. The picture on the top left there is actually a cast. So they have to molt their external skeleton, and you get these absolutely perfect casts, and they're very robust. That's one that I found on the seabed, picked up, stuffed it in my pocket, and brought it back. And they don't fall apart, and they're a nice little souvenir for the display cabinet. So sea search records have really helped to see how the spiny lobsters have increased in abundance. So, you know, if you look at the graphs here, which Angus Jackson has put together, you can see for the southwest, was it southwest? They're Cornwall and South Devon, that's right. So for Cornwall and South Devon, fairly level, small numbers, and you get to 2014 and zoom, it takes off. Total records 118, mean occupancy, and this is, you know, the same thing here. It's absolutely remarkable that they've come back in such numbers. And the photograph that I took at the Mewstone Gully on the 24th of August this year just shows what the old timers said they look like. The old timers said that they used to line up on rock shelves and you could take your pick, like shelves of a supermarket. Well, you can see three easily. There's another one here, there's another one here, and there's another one here. And altogether there were 9 along this rock face. Well, that's a remarkable recovery. So look out for records of spiny lobsters. And if you've got friends who go diving, get them to pick them up, turn them over and see if they've got eggs. This was a good one. Emma Griffin, a washout of sea potatoes, Echinocardium caudatum. So what you call a wreck at Goodrington on the 18th of May. Now, Echinocardium caudatum will be the first thing to come out the sediment if there's an oil spill, a chemical spill, if there's a lot of sewage about, if there's a storm. So having them washed up like this is nothing unusual. Now, May is when we get that big plankton bloom of May water, and I wonder whether the collapse of this Phaeocystis bloom meant the seabed was smothered and deoxygenation occurred, and the Echinocardium came out of their burrows, because of course they live under the sediment, and ended up washed ashore dead. That's my suggestion, but I would say that is likely a normal occurrence. Now, this is not an image from South Devon. This is from the Cornwall side of the Tamar, and it's dwarf seagrass or dwarf eelgrass, Zostra noltii. And what I want you to tell me is whether anywhere along your part of the south coast of Devon, you've seen the enormous increase in the cover of this seagrass species. I mean, you can see across here to the dockyard from the Cornwall side, and you can see how this intertidal, this is mid-tide level. This isn't the subtidal species. This is the intertidal species. You can see how it dominates the mudflats at mid-tide level. And there are aerial photographs which show for Will Cove about 7 years ago, no sign of any seagrass, and now enormous, great big areas covered in this intertidal Zostra noltii. So has anything similar happened in the ex-estuary, Dawlish Warren or whatever? I don't know whether there's this dwarf seagrass being recorded there, but you know, certainly be interesting if it's not just in the Tamar, but it's other places where there's been this enormous expansion of dwarf seagrass. Non-natives, okay, here's a good picture by Jana Fischer on the 11th of November 2022. Absolutely fabulous photograph of this red ripple bryozoan. Very pretty, but it really is expanding. Where it was, it's been first found, it's now extending to many more under boulder situations or shady situations. That's what it likes. It likes shady situations. And as far as I know, not subtidal, intertidal. So do look out for it when you're turning boulders over. Do some monitoring work if you can, because when it occurs in overhangs, you can easily photograph those overhangs and get an idea of what extent of the rock, what percentage cover it's got of the rock, and then go back a year later and see if it's the same. So a non-native species which is beginning to take over our substrata, but as I say, shaded overhangs under boulders, not open rock. Here's another one you could be looking out for. This is Bispira polyoma. Now, it was recorded during 2021 and 2022, and including in Plymouth, but it's just one that I want you to look out for. They're small, and they've got these blue tentacle fans. Now, these pictures taken on settlement panels in the marinas. I don't know that anyone has seen them on natural surfaces, but obviously if you find yourself snorkeling in a marina, with permission of course, and being very careful not to put your head between a yacht and the pontoon, yachts will treat your head like a fender. But look out for this Bispira polyoma. And then this isn't from South Devon, but it just goes to show how, if you've got sharp eyes and you're observant, then this sort of Plastodendrica, which is a Saccoglossum slug, feeding on Codium fragile. You see the green color has gone into its serrata, and it's probably doing what Elysia viridis does, and that's actually benefiting from the photosynthetic cells, the chloroplasts of the Codium, continuing to create sugar, which is part of its food. So I'm just encouraging you to be sharp-eyed and take good photographs. Use a decent camera. I know that iPhones are very good at a distance, and some of the new ones, I suspect, have got very good macro facilities, but do try and use something which will capture the characteristic features of these unusual species. And I do hope you've got sharp eyes. I thought I'd say something about management. I've really finished with the unusual species and so on now. But in terms of the state of southwest marine ecosystems, we also look at management, and we look at how we can actually improve our environment. And this was an interesting one. Plymouth City Council led Clear Up, but also collaborating with the Preventing Plastic Pollution Project at the end of April. And they actually commissioned divers to go in at Mutton Cove near the Royal William Yard in Plymouth, with the aim of recovering any plastics that they could. Well, they recovered a lot more than plastics. Look at that. 55 bikes, 22 scooters, 3 pushchairs, 1 go-kart, motorcycle, trolleys, car, truck tires, bike tires. What an enormous amount of junk people throw over the harbour wall there. I'm surprised they didn't find any laptop computers. Fortunately, they didn't find any bodies, but I know someone who's a retired policeman who used to be on the police diving team. And yes, Mutton Cove is where they used to go for their training, because they find all sorts of stuff there. But, people just dump stuff in the sea, and when it's dumped, it's disappeared. So that's all right, isn't it? Oh, it's not. And here's another one, which is actually from Corsan, not from Devon. But this sort of thing, it's a pity it ever has to happen, but clearing up lost gill nets is now a major project amongst many people. Ghost net fishing is a very significant issue from the point of view of those nets being lost and carry on fishing. The fishermen don't mean to lose them, but they're not very expensive to replace, so they're not particularly bothered about when they do get lost. And of course, when they get lost, they carry on fishing. And I'm not sure what to do about it. I do think that the gill nets ought to be tagged with an index number, which the Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority can identify the owner of the gill net and perhaps suggest that they might like to do something to help to find it and clear it up. I know that when we cleared up some wrasse traps at Baton Bay, and it did have a tag on one of the traps, and the IFCA could contact the boat skipper who'd set those traps. We actually collected 20 of them. And when the boat owner was contacted, he said, "Oh, I don't fish for wrasse anymore. I'm not interested." Well, no, that's not the idea. You know, he has some responsibility for recovering those lost traps, even if it's just to take the divers out or grapple for them, because I had the marks for them. I'd gone to the surface and taken various photographs where things could be lined up. When we went back with the people from Mylor who do this sort of clear up, they went on my marks and got them straight away. Found a heap of 20 pots which were recovered. But the fishermen responsible, not interested. I think a little bit of change of attitude might be needed there. So management, this is an oddity. I can't get my head around this, but apparently an important marine forest of Plymouth is being dedicated to the Queen to mark her Platinum Jubilee. Well, I know there's this green canopy project, but I don't see how kelp forest qualifies. But this is just a picture taken at Tinker Shoal at the entrance to Plymouth Sound. And this is the quote about kelp forests, some of the most productive ecosystems in the world. And in the UK, cover an area similar in size to the country's woodlands. Kelp is also thought to help regulate the atmosphere by absorbing carbon dioxide. Well, lots of seaweeds do that. But, oh, it's a shagstone. Sorry, it's not Tinker Shoal, it's a shagstone. I'm not sure it is actually, I think it's Tinker Shoal. But anyway, a peculiarity. But I suppose it draws attention to the importance of marine life. So we've reached the end, and now for my requests. So what have you seen? Make sure you put it on the Shores of South Devon Facebook page, but you can contact me as well. What's your interpretation of what you've seen? Do you think it's something which has been swept up by oceanic currents? Do you think it's something which has come across from the near continent, from Roscoff or something like that? If you've seen an increase in abundance, is it of a warm water species? If you've seen a range extension, what's your interpretation? And do you consider 2022 to have been a normal year, or any events not normal? So, you know, mull it over, soak in a hot bath, have a think. And if you think of anything which you believe might tell us something significant about the state of our Southwest Seas and the changes which are occurring, then do contact me. And if you've got any artistic enterprises, I'm always happy to use your line drawings. This is T.A. Stevenson's line drawing from his British Sea Anemones book, 2 books. I think it always used to be his wife who posed for these pictures, but he did absolutely superb illustrations, and not just pictures of ladies pouring sand into a dahlia anemone. So that's me done, folks. Now it's your turn.